Donald Trump's nominee now clearly in serious danger. There's been a whirlwind of developments. The context is clear. A second woman has come forward to accuse Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct. This is a new name, Deborah Ramirez, telling The New Yorker that when she and Kavanaugh were in college, she alleges that he exposed himself to her and then made him touch her without her consent. Kavanaugh vigorously denying this allegation, saying it did not happen, and calling this part of a smear, plain and simple. And that brings me to more of his perspective, which is, of course, a large part of the story, as is the allegations. We're about to show you something you almost never see. If you watch the news, you've probably seen a lot of Supreme Court battles recently. But here is a current nominee to the Supreme Court with his confirmation vote hanging in the balance, going on TV for an interview to defend himself. He went over to Fox News with his wife in this brand new interview that will air later tonight.
Did you guys ever look at each other and say, I'm out, this is enough, just isn't worth it?
I'm not going to let false accusations drive us out of this process, and we're looking for a fair process where I can be heard and defend my integrity, my lifelong record of promoting dignity and equality for women, starting with the women who knew me when I was 14 years old. I'm not going anywhere.
That is the latest from Judge Kavanaugh. As for the man who is trying to put him on the court, Donald Trump, coming out blasting today, defending the nominee and questioning the credibility of these women who have come forward as accusers.
There's a chance that this could be one of the single most unfair, unjust things to happen to a candidate for anything. For people to come out of the woodwork from 36 years ago and 30 years ago and never mention it, all of a sudden it happens. In my opinion, it's totally political. It is totally political.
The pressure mounting these protests today in Capitol Hill in front of the offices of several Republican senators who could decide whether this hearing even happens. Meanwhile, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Dianne Feinstein, is calling to postpone all the dealings here regarding Kavanaugh's nomination. Republicans, though, are not giving an inch in public, at least in the Senate, digging in their heels.
Even by the far left's standards, this shameful smear campaign has hit a new low.
Here is the update, though. Today, we heard again from Dr. Christine Ford telling the committee, Chairman Grassley, in a personal letter that she's ready to talk on Thursday, saying, while I am frightened, please know my fear will not hold me back from testifying. I'm joined tonight by Mara Gay, who writes for the New York Times editorial board, and attorney Nancy Erika Smith, who represented Gretchen Carlson in a sexual harassment lawsuit that ultimately brought down Fox News CEO Roger Ailes, and Elise Hogue, president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, which is one of the lead organizing groups that was doing that walkout today and supports Kavanaugh's accusers and is opposing his nomination. My thanks to all of you. I begin with you, having represented people in similar situations. Your analysis of where we are going into the potential hearing Thursday, if everyone still is on the same page, and what to make of the new accusation.
Well, as somebody who has been representing victims of sexual harassment for 38 years, when you hear certain stories, you almost are sure that there are other victims. And attempted rape is definitely a signal that there are going to be other victims. So I can't say that I'm surprised that there are other victims. I am surprised at the bravery of Ms. Ramirez to come out. I note that the two women that Kavanaugh's lawyers wanted to sign a letter that it didn't happen have removed their names from that letter. So it's not at all clear whether she actually has actual corroboration. But sexual assault doesn't usually take place in public. So if we're ever going to believe women, we have to start believing women now. Also, it's so funny that Martha McCallum is the person who got the interview, because she was one of Roger Ailes' first defenders when Gretchen Carlson claimed that he harassed her. So it's very funny that he chose her. It's also to hear the president, an admitted sexual predator on tape, who supported Roger Ailes, who supported O'Reilly, who supported a pedophile, Roy Moore, attack these women. This is why women don't come out. So these two women are incredibly brave. I am surprised that they will go in front of this GOP kangaroo court. I wish they'd come here. I wish they'd go directly to the American people with their witnesses and their families and look in the camera and talk directly to the American people, because this is not a fair process at all.
You're concerned about what would actually occur at the hearing.
I am.
I want to play more, Mara, for viewers to make up their own minds. It is, as I mentioned, very unusual to hear from a Supreme Court nominee in a television interview. He's completed the first round of hearings. This has only been scheduled because of the new accusation, and it quite clearly reflects a level of crisis at the White House. We also see the split messaging. We just showed Donald Trump's attacks. You gave your rebuttal, your view of that. The judge is trying to have it a different way and saying maybe this happened, but it just wasn't him. Take a look at a little more from the new interview.
The truth is, I've never sexually assaulted anyone in high school or otherwise. I am not questioning and have not questioned that perhaps Dr. Ford at some point in her life was sexually assaulted by someone in some place. But what I know is I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
You know, there's a human angle here and there's a politics issue of politics, but just to start with the human angle, I mean, the idea that Dr. Ford is sitting somewhere watching a man who, you know, who she believes committed attempted rape on her, who stopped her life as she knew it for years, you know, watching him deny, not only deny what happened, but actually also essentially say, well, you're confused, and gaslight her. You know, it's disgusting, frankly. Now, I just want to say we don't know what happened in that room. We weren't there. The issue before the Senate is not whether this can be proven in a court of law. That's not what this is about. This is about, is this claim, and in fact, are these two women who have come forward, are their claims credible enough to raise suspicion about the character of a man who could sit on Supreme Court for the rest of his life? That is a high bar. That is not the same as, can you prove it in a court of law? Should he be in jail? That's not the same issue, and I think that's being conflated here.
Well, and so, Nancy, I think that's something that is put very well and that we were discussing in our coverage at the end of last week as well. When people sometimes say, well, what is the presumption here? Or do you believe this or that party? They're adopting the language of court, which is explicitly weighted for the accused and for the rights of the defendant, because the defendant could go to jail. That is not, as I think you've both emphasized, that is not the standard for whether you, along with 100 other well-qualified applicants, should get a powerful promotion.
Right. And we actually live in a country where if you are in a job for 25, 30, 40 years, you don't have due process. Your employer can come in and say, you're fired, and I don't have to tell you why. So if you actually have a job, you're not entitled to due process in this country. He's applying for a job, and there aren't enough questions about his character yet. That just means that women don't matter. Applying for a job, you have no rights whatsoever, especially a lifetime appointment to the most important court in this country.
But can I also just say that I think the Republicans have done a fairly good job, actually, in the past week or two, of trying to kind of create this narrative as though, oh, any man can be accused.
Right.
No.
You mean an effective job?
Right. An effective. They have done an effective job, as though any man can be accused at any time of something he didn't do. And I'm sorry, we didn't hear this about Neil Gorsuch. I mean, this is actually not. No, it's, you can be accused of something if you've actually committed a wrong. And so, you know, we don't know what happened, but these claims are credible. And that's the thing to focus on.
Well, and so let me go to Elise on that point, because Elise, for anyone who is genuinely interested in adjudicating the claims and who holds out the possibility that, as with any proceeding, some of the claims may not be provable or true, if you are the one being accused, you would want more time and more information and more witnesses and more testimony, because presumably that would over the process out. And so that is in stark contrast to some other new reporting today that is procedural, but I think quite important, at least, and I wonder your view of it, in the New Yorker, that says senior Republican staff actually learned of this new allegation we're reporting against Kavanaugh last week, expressed concern about its impact soon after Senate Republicans issued renewed calls to accelerate the timing of the committee vote. Translation, an interest in rushing past information finding rather than using that process to potentially clear his name if his name could be cleared.
I think that's absolutely right. All right, look, women all over this country know three things. They know that there is almost never a false claim and that this one rings true. They know that Brett Kavanaugh has already lied under oath. He's already a liar. And they know that the Republicans' insistence at every step to steamroll process, make no attempt to get the evidence, the witnesses, is literally at every step screaming to women, you don't matter. And that's why today tens of thousands of women screamed back. And I think the question we have to ask is why? I mean, really, much like sexual assault, the GOP is using this process to exert pure power over women around the country. I mean, surely there are dozens, if not hundreds, of qualified applicants for this space on the Supreme Court, and yet they're clinging to this one. And the risk of putting someone who has shown such disdain for women into a position where he would literally hold millions of women's lives or bodily choices hostage is egregious, and it's really just about them demonstrating power, and women have had it.
You say women have had it. Jane Mayer, who was in the New Yorker with Ronan Farrow on the latest scoop, was just speaking about how there was a process of people, I think many of them women, discussing this for quite an amount of time with Kavanaugh before any of this came out publicly. Take a listen.
We found classmates had been talking about this for weeks and months. Since July, there have been an email chain of Yale classmates of Kavanaugh talking about, will this thing come out, long before Christine Blasey Ford came forward.
Elise, that goes to another question here that I'm sure is difficult to answer for anyone, and you don't represent Senator Feinstein, but there are people who are criticizing the process, saying that she did not push this forward in a public way earlier.
Look, I mean, we can play 20/20 hindsight, as the day is long. I think it is a very complicated decision for any woman to want to come forward in any setting. I mean, this happens in high schools, and young women don't want to come forward. When you are Dr. Christine Blasey Ford or you are Deborah Ramirez, who we believe 100%, and you know the cost to your family, of course you're going to want to take your time. You're going to want to think about the implications because the cards are stacked against you. And to me, that means every single person involved in this proceeding should be thinking about why they would come forward if for any other reason that this is the truth and they are trying to save this country from a terrible fate of having this man on the Supreme Court. He should be withdrawn immediately, or else the GOP and President Trump are saying they don't care about the integrity of this court and they don't care about women.
Right, and that's the question going in as we hear from Judge Kavanaugh speaking out more forcefully tonight, and going towards this hearing. Who's going to testify? Is there going to be a hearing? Does he make it to Thursday? Mara Gay, Nancy, Erika Smith, and Elise Hogue, thanks to each of you.